So we've definitely talked about the Blair Witch a lot on this channel.
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of Blair Witch content. I do feel like it's one of the more underappreciated franchises that there is in horror. It has a lot of lore.
A lot.
Expanded lore.
A lot.
But it also has extended cuts or director's cuts and whatnot. And the first film has an original cut, so it says. Now, this was sent to me by Guillermo Canales, who has sent me tons and tons of stuff. He sent me also other stuff that we'll talk about in the future. But for now, I don't know exactly what cut this is, right? I've heard a lot of different things about different cuts. One that they showed at a film festival and this and that. Whether or not this is that, I don't know. But I can tell you that the original cut of the film that we are all used to, the one that we saw in theaters, was just over an hour and 20 minutes long. This is 2 hours and 23 minutes long. So this is over an hour longer. Now, this has some really rough footage, but then it also has some really normal looking footage, all of which is extended. And there are long scenes that are extended. It's not just like a minute scene or 20 seconds here. For an hour longer, you have to expect that there's going to be some scenes that go on for a long time. And there's one in particular that takes place at the Crybaby Bridge.
Yep.
That scene's got to be
Like
at least 15 minutes long. At least 15 minutes long. But now, we're not here to talk about the Blair Witch Project film. We're here to only really discuss the extended footage and whether it complements the film or it detracts from it, what cuts they should have made, what cuts they shouldn't have made, this and that. So that's all we're really here to talk about. We're both big fans of the entire franchise, and I did cover all three films. We reviewed the video game. We reviewed the Hunt a Killer, first season, first box, episode 1. We have reviewed some of the Blair Witch young adult novels. Like, we've talked about a lot of Blair Witch on the channel. So if you want to hear our thoughts on anything Blair Witch, you pretty much can find it.
The Blair Witch escape room too.
Oh yeah, we went to the Blair Witch escape room in Vegas. So let's discuss the footage that's relevant to discuss. Now, we're not going to talk about every single piece of because there are literal seconds added.
Yes.
And it's normal quality, then garbage quality, and it just extends a shot of the trees for a second. And you're like, you didn't need to put that.
Right.
You didn't need to put that in here. It's a complete waste of our time. It's only a second of our time, but it's still that wasn't necessary. So I'm not even honestly sure why that's in here. If someone did put this together from deleted scenes, I'm assuming. But they did a very good job of making it all flow together as one thing. The quality drop is insane.
It really is.
You think the quality of the film in the Blair Witch Project is bad on its own? Oh. This is when you used to have those really, really old cell phones with a camera on it, and you try to take video, and the pixels were this big each, and it was just blocks.
That's 100%
that kind of made it look sort of like a thing. You're like,
it's...
am I looking at a watermelon or a Buick? I don't know what the hell I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's so distorted, and on one
But that's
hand,
not all the extended footage by any means.
No.
There's tons of footage in here that looks just like the rest of the footage.
Yes.
And I would say probably 15%, 10 to 15% of the footage is horrendous. The footage, the new footage, 10 to 15% of the new footage, the hour, is horrendous and unwatchable. And only really the dialogue is worth anything. You might as well just not even put anything on the screen. Just be like, well, maybe put up some words. And this is like what was supposed to be here. And then the dialogue's over it. And even the dialogue doesn't sound great.
Yeah, I was just going to say that on one hand, there's a part of me that like, even the unusable footage that's in here, it like kind of does add that layer of realism, which I think that the film doesn't need because it already comes across as extremely authentic. But for some reason, when you get those like little clips that are super distorted and messed up, it's kind of like
authenticity.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would of course much rather be able to see what's actually in those clips and see it clearly. But
I mean, I suppose it's possible that the distortion of the footage is an artistic choice. That it's like the film degradation was so bad in parts. Here's what it looked like, and then when they went to go edit it, they're like, you know what? That was a bad idea. Let's just cut all that out.
Sure.
Let's cut all the distorted footage out. It's possible. It's possible. But with a film that you've seen a lot, a classic film, because the original Blair Witch is definitely a classic horror film at this point, like it or not. But it's always interesting and really cool, even if it's not good. It's always cool to see added footage that you're not familiar with, right? Because like when you watch something you're uber familiar with, you're on autopilot. I remember the first time I went and saw The Exorcist, the version you've never seen, that I've seen like 10 times now. So that title doesn't hold up anymore. When I went to the theater, I'd seen The Exorcist plenty of times. So the film is autopilot for me. I'm just like, okay, I know this movie, right? And so like when Reagan does the spider walk down the stairs, had I never seen the film before, it might have been scary, it might have been jarring, but not expecting it when you're on autopilot was something, it's kind of like walking around your house and what's around every corner. And if you walked into like your bedroom and you were outside, go to our TikTok. You'd be so just taken aback, right?
Yeah.
But if you usually walk through your door and you see the outside, it wouldn't be shocking, right? And so it is always cool. It's like watching the TV edit of the original Halloween and getting Loomis before the Smiths Grove committee, and Lori on the phone, talking to her friend and to Annie, and then Linda shows up to like borrow her blouse. And you're like, it's weird, but it's cool. Because, like, even though those scenes, like, especially, like, Linda coming over for a shirt, it's like, it's not necessary. But it's, like, super cool. It's like, oh, it's like getting to spend a little extra time with your friends or, like, someone who died. And there's no more of them. And it's like, wait, there's a little more of them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It just is, it feels like a treat to get more time with the characters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's get into the footage. So, the found footage. That's how we took it while we were watching it. It's like, oh, they found more footage.
It was cool. Well, see, and that's kind of why the degraded film sort of works too, because like
it's been lost for 20 years to us. Well, now it'd be 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm still, I want to write that script, man. I want to write that sequel script.
It would be wonderful. I think you should.
In 1994, the filmmakers went missing. And then 30 years later, it's like their footage, a year later, their footage was found. 30 years later, they came back, or they were found.
Yes.
And I just, bringing back Mike and Heather and Josh, and like they've been found in the woods. Like they just wandered out. They were like going through Burkittsville, and they're like, wait a minute, who are these? Like, wait, holy shit, it's those guys who went missing 30 years ago.
Yes. And
to do it all in body cams. Steal my idea. I don't care. Okay, I give you permission. I just want to see that movie. I should write it. I should present it to like Eduardo Sanchez or whoever the hell owns the prize, like Lionsgate, or I should go in there like Chris Rock and be like, I'm not Chris Rock
But I have a movie pitch for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a horror movie review channel with like almost 16,000 subscribers. You better listen to me.
Hell yeah.
Look how many videos we have on Blair Witch. I know my shit. Okay. So the found footage that we are here to talk about. We get a totally different opening, and a totally different ending.
Yep.
And now, when I say totally different ending, don't get excited. It's still the same ending.
Yes.
Mike is in the corner. Heather's knocked down. The camera sits there on the ground, and it, runs out after a while because that's extended for like an extra 20 seconds of the footage just kind of keep rolling, but in that really shitty quality footage that we were talking about. And I was like, we don't need this.
Yeah.
We don't need this. But what I'm saying by the totally different opening and the totally different ending is that the opening and the ending are both news clips.
Yep.
There's the news of these guys going missing. And then at the end, it's the news of the search team that is out looking for them. And then eventually that they've given up after about 10 days. And then the cops going through their footage and just looking at the tapes and the film. They did this, of course, to add that authenticity to it. But I definitely do not like it in the end. The opening, I'm indifferent on. I honestly can tell you that there's only a very few things that I would keep from this. I completely understand why they cut almost every single bit of it. And I'm fine with them having cut every bit of it. But if I could keep some, they're like, you have to keep 5 minutes or something. I definitely could find some stuff that I did quite like. And I'm like, oh, I like this. And I think this adds to certain characters and moments. But overall, I am fine with everything they cut. But the ending, I like the cold ending. When you saw it in theaters, there were no credits. Right? When I saw this in theaters originally, back in '99, when Heather went down and that footage went black, the lights in the theater came up, and that was it. It wasn't until DVD that you got the written, directed, shot, edited, whatever the shit by Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick, right? Like, that was added later once the cat was out of the bag, that it was a film. And the DVD came with a commentary and everything, so it was no joke. Like, everybody knew it was fake at that point, but in the theater, they were still trying to sell it as real, so there were no credits. It was just black, and that is way more haunting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it is more impactful to have the cold ending. But I don't know. I liked seeing the news, the news clips in the beginning and in the end, because it does add the authenticity.
Sure.
I feel like it's sort of just like how, the townspeople, like the Burkittsville locals, feel so real. And I felt that way about the news anchors and just the little clips. Like, it really did feel like, real newscasting. And it was actually kind of cool to see, like, the detectives laying out all the videos. They had the film canisters and the cassettes and everything. And I thought that was neat because, I don't know, I think one of the reasons why we both love the Blair Witch franchise so much is like what you were saying in the beginning of this, that there's so much extended lore. And so I think having those little bits in there kind of just extended it for me. But as far as like the rest of the film goes, there's definitely a couple things that I would love to keep. A couple scenes, but unfortunately one of those scenes, it's primarily just the audio that I really like, and then all of the distorted and messed up footage could definitely be cut out without missing anything, I think.
We also get an interview with Josh's dad.
Yes.
In the opening, which is new. And, it's cool to see a family member being talked to about the disappearance of his son. It adds a little bit of, emotional weight to it, right? When you see a loved one or a parent who's missing their child. So that was cool. The woman in the opening, she outright says found footage. which was cool to hear. And the very, very long Crybaby Bridge scene where they go to this bridge where a black baby was hung by the KKK. Yeah. And if you are to sit under this bridge at midnight, you'll hear the sound of a baby crying as well as a train passing by on a train track that runs across the bridge above you but is no longer in operation. So it's a ghost baby and a ghost train. Now, you liked some things from this scene.
Yeah, I really like the dialogue in the scene. I mean, you really can't see hardly anything. You can see the faces.
I also want to point out really quick, there is a fourth person with them in this scene.
That, I don't know what that is.
You cannot tell who they are. They never speak to them.
No.
But Josh is filming. Heather is in front of the camera the majority of the time. Yeah. You do get some glimpses of Mike here and there. And there is this fourth male. Yeah. Well, a third male, but a fourth person who is male. Who's there. And you can... If the footage was cleaner, you could tell who he was. But it's just so quick that they pan past him. The first time I was like, wait, who was that? And you were like, I don't think that was anybody. And I was like, no, there's a fourth person there. Because when they're driving to Crybaby Bridge, I was like, who the hell's filming?
Yes.
Right? Because I was like, there's no way Josh is filming. It's Mike and Heather in the back seat. Why would they both be in the back seat? If it was just Josh, he's their chauffeur all of a sudden? Like, he's filming, and then she's like, oh, look over here. Or Mike or Heather says something. I don't know. Somebody says, like, look, out front. And they do. And then, and he turns the camera, and he's looking. I'm like, there's no way Josh is driving and, like, filming them, right? It doesn't make any sense. So then I'm, like, sitting there thinking about that. And then we do see a fourth person. Yeah. This is like the old drummer for the Beatles. Right? Or like the old drummer for Nirvana or Blink 182 or like that member of the crew who like left right before they got big. Right? I was there. I was in the Blair Witch Project. And like, bullshit you were. Like, no, man. If you watch that extended cut, you'll see me in the dark. It's like, dude, that could be anybody.
There is definitely somebody there. I don't have an explanation for that at all.
I want to know who this fourth person is.
I do too. I am.
Yeah, it's a guy curious. From what we can tell.
Yeah.
Right.
I have no idea who it is, but
so continue.
So the scene you can't see anything, and that is the real bummer because there's a lot of like pointing at blackness. But so if we could see more, I would probably like the scene to be included. But the dialogue is really cool because I think that it shows. I was telling you, I really felt like it gave us another glimpse at how obsessive Heather is about this project and about the Blair Witch. So I really appreciated that, like, further insight into her character. But it was cool because they were talking about, like, they kept hearing a sound and they couldn't tell, what it was, but they kind of decided, all three of them, that it was an owl. And then there was some discussion about how, like, the owl sounds also like a baby crying as well as a train. Yeah. And then Heather brings up that it also sounds like women keening, which is like a burial or a grieving practice in Celtic nations, right? Where the women would, like, scream, cry for days after somebody died. And I just thought that was really creepy for her to bring up, especially just given the setting, like they're under this bridge at midnight. So, like, all the things that my brain was filling in I really liked about how it looked, but you can't see anything as far as that goes. And I did think this is the prettiest Heather looked. You said you were like the whole scene. You're like, she's so pretty here.
She did. She looked pretty to me.
Yeah, which is funny because the camera angle wasn't really anything that different from what I feel like we get.
I've always been back and forth on if I think Heather is attractive or not. And like in some scenes, I don't think she's attractive at all. And in other scenes, I'm like, she's actually attractive. So just noticed in that scene, I was like, this is the prettiest I feel like she's looked. Maybe because she's in low light. I don't know. But regardless, you can't see shit. You really can't. Heather, like, touches this part of the bridge where there's, like, dirt and water, and then she, like, licks it, and I was like,
yes.
ugh.
There's supposed to be blood dripping down. Yeah, when she licked it, I was like, no way would I ever do that, but it's fine. And then also in this scene, I feel like we get Josh acting really weird. Like, I can't quite get a read on what the intention is, but he's like standing there with his hands just like cupped, like staring down at his hands, and Heather comes over and is like filming him, and he's like, I don't know why, but I just felt like if the baby was gonna fall down, it would fall right here on this side of the bridge, and I was gonna catch it. And I can't tell if he's super baked, because he's also coughing a bunch.
Yeah.
In a lot of
and
these.
He's like, I need to stop doing drugs.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, he's token. And then later, after they leave the bridge, when they're in the car, there's like 30 seconds of him just staring at the camera, filming himself, unblinking. And that actually really disturbed me. I was very creeped out by that, because it feels like, you know, the Blair Witch is already having an influence on them at this point. And that was the vibe I was getting. So. Definitely
not me. My interpretation of that scene is that when they originally sat down to structure the narrative of this film, when they sat in the editing room and they took all of the rough footage that Heather and Josh and Mike had delivered after they were done with them in the woods, they had a lot of footage. And in the editing room, they had to come up with the narrative. This was unscripted. You know, it was mildly scripted, but mostly unscripted. So it was a very loose narrative. And they were trying to make a decision on, like, what the audience was going to focus on with what is the threats and the villains of the show. And I think that this is supposed to cast some shadow of doubt on Josh potentially being the villain of the film. Mm-hmm. And I think that they decided ultimately to just cut this from the film and make it very focused on that it's just something out in the woods that's after them and that they're the victims. But this definitely was a moment that they included at first to try to paint a dark light on Josh to make you uneasy with him. And I mean, he's sitting under the bridge, as you had said, and he's talking about how he can feel the baby, right? And you know, he's connected to it in some way. Now, I definitely agree that this whole scene should be cut for a lot of reasons. That narrative of Josh being a villain and all that, I just don't think it's necessary. But also, like, this is completely, you know, getting off topic. This has nothing to do with the Blair Witch. This, you know, just has to do with local legends in the town. So this is an exploration of, like, you know, folk tales of Burkittsville, formerly Blair. And it's like they cut it out because you can't see shit. Maybe if they cleaned the footage up, you would be able to. But it's a rather boring scene. I think there is some decent dialogue, but it loses focus. It's so long and ultimately pointless. So it was cool to see, because it is such a long scene, and you do kind of get a little bit more character out of all of them, except for the fourth person who never says a word. So I liked having it now as a reference point.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't ever need to see it again, because I didn't see it this time.
Yeah.
Nobody saw anything.
See anything.
And then we also then cut to the hotel where they do their drinking and hanging out a little bit. And this is another very long scene, probably 10 minutes long, of Mike and Josh doing some kind of poetry slam, where Mike and Josh both recite 2 different poems that I think that they wrote. Right? This is their original work.
I don't know. Yeah.
Mike's for sure is, I think. Right?
I mean, yes, the both of them. Sorry, I guess I was like, I don't know if the actors like
sure,
wrote
but this
it,
is
or
supposed
if
to be
they,
Mike and Josh's
yes,
original.
Both of them are poets, and
Sure.
they share their original poetry.
Now, this is definitely a scene that I would have been very fine with including in the film because it gives character to them. I think they deliver this scene very well, and I think that this is a scene that you can really heavily analyze if you wanted to sit down. I think this would have been a very cool scene to include because it shows you the different kinds of characters you're dealing with. You got Heather, who's kind of, the smart ass who's sitting in the back doing her Merry Little Had a Little Lamb moment where she's trying to like be included. And then you've got, Mike, who's a little bit more romantic. And you've got Josh, who seems to be a little bit more nihilistic and morose. So I like that differentiates them from each other. And I think that you could really get into the actual transcript of the words and try to decipher if there is something more there, right, to take from what they're saying. Does it have any kind of foreshadowing or anything like that?
Yeah, I love this scene. I 100% would have included it in the final cut because as everything really that you just said about showing a lot of just interesting character traits, and I just thought it was really cute, and it made me really happy to see it too. So
yeah, that's a good scene. Definitely would have been fine with that being in the film. So for sure that should be in there. But as I said, I love the film as is. But this, if I had a vote, I would have been like, no, we should keep this in. But I do understand why they cut it out because it just speeds it up, right? It just kind of slows the film down, and some people can get kind of eye rolly on poetry. Right?
It's actually really good poetry, though.
Sure.
Both Josh and Mike have really great poems.
Yeah. I'd have to listen to them again and really pay attention to like what they're saying. I was, but like they talk really fast, and I was just like, whoa, I'd like to break this down. I like the inclusion of Heather's outtakes when she's doing her documentary. When she goes to Coffin Rock or when she goes to the graveyard, we only see her perfect attempt, her used attempt, and in this, each one of them includes mess ups of her trying to like start the dialogue and messing it up, and that really adds a layer of authenticity to it to me. So I liked it. It's not necessary, but I thought it was cool to see her kind of mess up her lines and like try to pull her head together because she is so into it and she wants to take it so seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
You get Josh, who's trying to stay behind, and Mike is not having it, but Heather is like, fine, screw you, we're out of here. Right? So there's more of that dynamic going on, and there's a lot more fighting.
Yes.
In this version, they're screaming at each other more, but there's also a lot more forgiveness and bonding in this cut as well, and we'll get there, especially the the Heather and Mike scene, which I really liked. But yeah, what did you take away from like Josh just kind of giving up and Heather being like, screw you, let's go, Mike, we're going south?
There's some like antagonism there for sure. But I mean, overall, I like that they're butting heads, because I think that's, obviously Heather doesn't really know Mike, right? She knows Josh. So for them to kind of, obviously all of them are under extreme pressure and stress. So seeing all these fights happen makes it much more genuine. Although I think that the original cut, or the cut that we have of the movie, still does that, like still shows their just the tensions and everything. But I really like the scene that you were talking about with Mike and Heather and the forgiveness that's there. I think that is just really cool because, you would fluctuate between being super pissed off and, angry and hungry and tired and like frustrated and sad and all these other like negative emotions. And then you eventually have to move into some type of like comforting emotion just to keep yourself sane. But I think, Josh in that moment is just, what are you going to do? Keep walking? Like, they've been walking for so long.
Yeah.
They've been lost for so long.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a horrible idea to go to a high spot and try and, like, get some attention from somebody from, the tallest point, as he says, which, unfortunately, he doesn't know if that's the tallest point, which is why, Mike and Heather are like, we got to keep moving. Like, we can't stay here. But, it's... what are you gonna do?
Right.
I think it's as believable as anything else.
I do like that Josh points out that, because they're kind of asking throughout, like, what could this be? And, he starts talking about how they interviewed a bunch of people in town and that some people were pretty hostile about it. We don't really get to see those hostile people much. We only really see the guy who's like the really old dude, and he's just like, do you believe in witchcraft? Nope. You believe in, are you a religious man? Yep.
Yeah.
Like, he's just standoffish, right? But Josh points out that they talk to people in town who are like not excited about what they're doing. And that he thinks that they're the ones potentially who followed them out there and are screwing with them. And I liked that inclusion because it makes sense that, for them to start really kind of trying to analyze the logistics and what could potentially be happening in their predicament.
He also, in that same scene where he's thinking that maybe it's people from
cult.
town, he says that they start talking about the cult, and, it's in the late 60s or so that they were active.
Now, you read that Blair Witch book that I have not read. It's called the Blair Witch Dossier.
Yes.
Was there a mention of a cult from the 60s?
I don't remember if it's the 60s, but they definitely talk about the cult, and there's a guy in it that is like in the 60s or 70s, like that fancies himself. What's his name?
That freaking like hippie looking dude that looked like the lead singer of Blind Melon.
Yeah. And because they have like the manuscript, and then
we see him in the Curse, or wait, which is the document? There's two documentaries. There's the one for the Blair Witch 2, and there's the one for the Blair Witch 1. There's the Shadow of the Blair Witch and the Curse of the Blair Witch is for the first one.
I think it would be with the first
documentary. It is the first
documentary for the first movie. So that's definitely in that dossier.
We need to review those on the channel too.
Yeah, we should. There's also mention of it in some parts of, I've only read 2 now, but I thought that was also mentioned
by Cade Morrell?
Yeah, in the young adult novels as well. This
the Blair
cult.
Witch Files.
Well, specifically the book, because it's like the witch's book that she compiled, right?
The Book of Shadows?
The Book of Shadows.
Is that really what it is?
No, I don't know if it's the Book of Shadows, but anyway, it's where they have like all of the like the alphabet, right? Like the weird witch alphabet thing. But in that dossier, they do talk about how the what is it called? The cartography. What is the word that I'm thinking of?
The cartography is
cartography.
How you take.
It's
like,
so the altitude.
Out?
Yeah, the maps.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so they're in that dossier. It's said that like the government and like the town, like nobody has an accurate map of the area. Like everyone that goes out there that tries to map it, they all come back with different things.
I love that.
And specifically in the dossier, they say that the footage makes no sense because of there are hills, but
the topography.
Yeah, the topography does not match up with what people thought existed in the woods. so that there is like there's parts of the woods that are way more steep than they should be for that area geographically, which I think is really cool. And I thought of that when Josh was like, let me climb to the tallest point. It's like, you know, the woods, I mean, that's what's so cool is that the woods are this portal, like that just, and all kinds of weird happenings go on there. So
Yeah, you're right. That probably is the cult leader dude, the dude with the long hair and the hippie glasses and all that stuff. That would make sense. So that's probably what they're in reference to. And as I said, we'll watch the Curse of the Blair Witch, the Shadow of the Blair Witch, and also coming soon. Not tonight, but soon. We are watching the Joe Berlinger director's cut, as close as someone can get it, of the Blair Witch 2. No Book of Shadows.
Just the Blair Witch.
Book of Shadows was thrown on by the studio. Obviously, there's no such item that appears in the film.
No.
Means nothing to the movie. Why it's included, I have no idea. But Joe Berlinger's original Blair Witch 2, as was meant to be seen, we found a fan edit. This guy did everything he possibly could to get it as close to Berlinger's cut.
Yeah.
And we found it. We'll leave it in the link below when we do that video, and we'll also re-mention that at the time. But that's coming soon as well. In fact, you know, you might be watching this later and it's available now.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Lucky you.
all the stuff we're talking about might be available then. Okay. Let's see. There's some more intense noises going on outside the tent. I don't really exactly know how to describe them, so I'm just going to kind of move on.
They're just intense.
They're like, what is that?
I don't know. They sound very inhuman.
Yes, unhuman.
They sound unhuman.
There is this great scene between Heather and Mike, and, you know, he's really, because Heather really takes this, you know, hard.
Yeah.
She really blames herself. And there is an extended line in her famous speech where she has the focus too close into her face, the famous scene from the movie. There is an extended bit of dialogue. It's a very short piece of dialogue, but it's important, and it really goes, and I'm not sure why they cut it. Maybe because it makes Heather look more villainous or more at fault, and maybe they didn't want to paint her in that light, where people would get like mad at her because people are a little less forgiving when it comes to women in movies, which is super annoying, but it's true.
Yeah.
So Heather does talk about how she knew more to the story than she was telling Mike and Josh, and that she purposely omitted it from what she was telling them so that they wouldn't get too spooked and not come out there. And now that adds to why she feels so guilty. So I like that line, and it is a good maybe 10 or 15 second moment, maybe in 20 seconds, but it's there, it's part of that speech, and it's like, oh, this is important. But it really goes, it pairs very well. It complements the next scene that they cut out, which is when Mike and Heather are alone. Josh is missing by this point. And, you know, Josh is sitting there, and Mike is sitting there, and he's like really, really trying to reiterate as much as he can that it's not Heather's fault. That this is an impossible situation that no one could have ever, you know, imagined. And Heather is just beside herself, and there's a lot of crying between both of them. They're both terrified, and there's like a really they're very connected in that moment. They're holding hands, and I really like this scene. I think it adds to how devastating what's going on is.
Yes.
Right? It just adds this emotional weight to it.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, when he's like, God's going to help us, God's going to save us, like all of that, it's so emotional, and it really does add a heaviness to what's going on that I think, I mean, it's still there. Like, it's hard because, you know, what we get, the version that everybody knows of the Blair Witch, I think is so wonderful, but having like this kind of a scene, like it's really exciting to see, because it does just it hits differently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also in this scene, and kind of later, because there is another scene, one of the last scenes, that's new. There is this moment, and I think this is a really great moment for Mike and Heather, but she's behind the camera, so we can't see her. We can really only see Mike. We can hear Heather, so she's included in it as well, and you can hear it in her voice. But like Mike really comes to the realization in that moment when him and Heather are crying and holding hands and talking about whose fault and all that. He really, like, it hits him that like the footage is only there to serve as their memorial. Like, he's like, oh my God, like this is what I'm doing right now in front of this camera is the last thing anyone will ever see me do. Like, this is my goodbye. This is my legacy. And it's just when he says it, like, he kind of comes to the realization. I couldn't, verbatim. I don't even honestly know it well enough to even give you, some kind of abridged version. But yeah, it is a good moment. I don't know why I can't think of what I'm trying to say there. And not an abridged version, but
like the summarized synopses.
No. I'll come up with it. But it's a way of saying something. I hate when I do that. This is see, guys, we do really well though. I mean, for people who don't edit at all,
yeah,
right? We rarely mess up or stumble over our words, and if we do, we at least make it entertaining.
Well, yeah, fun. I definitely think you are like perfect at it for the most part. Like, you rarely stumble, but I for sure
there's just stuck. Words that just like I can't get them. They're there and I use them. This is like something I've used a million times. And it's just like, so annoying. I hate when that happens, and my brain's now stuck on it, and I'm like, no, stop. Let's move on. Yeah. Also during the scene that's in the tent that happens then after, where Mike is saying his goodbyes to the family, his family and friends, which is really sad. This comes with an FX logo in the right-hand corner, like it aired on FX at one point, the television channel. So there must have been a special edition or extended footage or whatever on FX at one point. And this is the only footage in the entirety of this 2-hour and 23-minute runtime where we get that FX logo. And I guess this is the only footage they had to draw from to put in here. This kind of reminds me of like Needful Things that had a TNT edit that was like an hour longer, which I've always wanted to see, and I never have. But I want to see like a master cut where they put the R-rated stuff together with the TV edit, because the TV edit obviously cuts all the R-rated stuff out and adds all this extra like hour of footage. I want to see them, put together. But this is interesting. Obviously FX played it.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was the only time, as you said, that was there. I think I would have been mildly annoyed if it was there the whole time, but
oh god, yeah. If it came up for every single one of those scenes,
because it totally takes you out of the like found footage feel, like beyond belief. You're like, wait, what? Why is that down there?
Yeah, I don't get why it's there, but obviously someone will tell us, like, or maybe we can Google it.
Maybe.
And then there is a foreshadowing line from Heather where she's talking about, like, she's trying to tell Mike and, like, kind of, encourage him to never quit, right? She's given, like, the little pep rally, like, rah, 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 we're never giving up. And Mike is very defeated in this point. He's just like, I want to go to bed. I just can't take it anymore. And Heather's, like, ready to still fight. She's ready to keep swinging. Yeah. Heather's definitely the one that has the most tenacity of the three. She's a fighter. She ain't going down without swinging. Or, as she said, she's not going down. If she goes down, she's going down with the camera rolling. Yes. Right? This, of course, is foreshadowed for her demise.
Yeah, I love that.
But there you go. So I liked that little line. as I said, the footage at the end runs a little longer, completely unnecessary. Then it ends with the footage, and that's really it.
Yep.
So, yeah, overall, it was cool to see.
Very cool to see.
I have no interest in ever watching it again.
No.
If I ever watch it again, it will just be the Blair Witch Project as is. And I will always be like, oh, that scene where they do the poetry slam, or the scene with Mike and Heather, or that, it'll be cool to reminisce over. Mm-hmm. But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if we made our own cut, right, where we cut out all the things we didn't like and then added, like, that would be cool. But this is such a longer version, and I don't have any problem with lengthy movies at all. But because so much of the footage is just unusable, it really does kind of drag on at times. And I think that, the way that the film is cut in the end, it does such a wonderful job at compressing everything. So you still get, all of the weirdness with Heather and Josh, and like it's done as perfectly as possible. So yeah, I'm very excited to see the Blair Witch 2.
Yeah,
that cut.
Absolutely.
That I'm super curious about, because it takes out all of the studio interference and meddling, so it'll be really, really neat to see it the way it was intended to be viewed. And I think that we'll probably be way more excited about that than this cut.
I can't let it go. It's like it's there, and it's when you're gonna go to say something back that you'd heard said by somebody, and you're like you're just gonna wing it, and you're like, why can I not think of that? It is driving me absolutely insane. You guys don't understand. I say this term all the time at work.
Oh.
I'm always like, this isn't verbatim. I'm just gonna whatever, and it's killing my brain. Like, I want to punch my freaking brain out of my head right now.
Oh no!
Don't you hate when that happens?
Yeah.
When there's this word.
Yeah. Or
something. It happens with movies all the time, where I can't think of like an actor, or you hear that like 2 seconds of a song, and you're like,
That's
oh,
awful.
I know what that is. I know what that is.
Yes.
And then when it hits you, you're like, oh my god, I'm such a moron.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I feel right now. We're gonna end it on that. I never got it. It will hit me the second I press stop. It is what it is. We'll get it in the comments.
Yeah.
So how you get a hold of this cut, I have no idea. We got it sent. So hopefully Guillermo Canales can fill us all in on where he got it.
Yeah.
On where you can get it if you want to watch it. I'm sure it exists on some torrent site. I'm sure it's easy to find if you look for it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what this cut is. You can let us know. Guillermo, let us know what this cut is.
Let us know.
But other than that, guys, as I said, go to the TikTok, because we do some pretty fun videos.
Yes, we do.
And also Instagram, and we do a Patreon where we do a watch party every other week.
Yep.
This week coming up is Beetlejuice in celebration of our wedding. We got our marriage license today.
We did.
So let's commemorate that right here on this channel. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's that. So see you soon.
Yes. Bye.
Paraphrasing. That's what I couldn't think of. Paraphrasing. That's it. Bye.